were being put into Bantustans. Well, the same thing is happening in Israel today in the West Bank. And I just want to read out to you, so you know, I mean, apartheid is a crime, and it's legally defined, and the definitions of apartheid are deliberate imposition on a racial group or groups of living conditions calculated to cause its or their physical destruction in whole or in part. And that definitely applies to the West Bank, in particularly in terms of building permits, in terms of water resources, in terms of land and taking a land. Another definition is any legislative measures and other measures calculated to prevent a racial group or groups from participation in the political, social, economic and cultural life of the country, and the deliberate creation of conditions preventing the full development of such a group or groups. In particular, by denying members of a racial group or groups basic human rights and freedoms, including the right to work, the right to form recognised trade unions, the right to education, the right to leave and to return to their country, the right to a nationality, the right to freedom of movement and residence, the right to freedom of opinion and expression, and the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. And Israel is guilty under all those headings of the crime of apartheid, whether it's in the occupied West Bank or whether it's in within the 67 borders of Israel. It goes on, any measures including legislative measures designed to divide the populations along racial lines by the creation of separate reserves and ghettos for the member of a racial group or groups, the prohibition of mixed marriages among members of various racial groups, the expropriation of landed property belonging to a racial group or groups to members thereof. And we know the laws in Israel. If you're a Palestinian, an Israeli Palestinian, and you marry a Palestinian in the West Bank, you can't live in Israel. So there is the racial law in Israel. And the land is being appropriated for a particular ethnic group in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, all the time, every day. And it also goes on to say, persecution of organisations and persons by depriving them of fundamental rights and freedoms because they oppose apartheid. And we see this is used extensively in Israel, where they use administrative detention, where you can be interned without trial. We had it here in this country, internment. It's viewed as widespread in Israel. People are interned without trial because they oppose the Israeli crime of apartheid. The situation in Palestine at the moment, in the West Bank is just 22% of the historic Palestine. And according to the recent B'Tselem report, which is an Israeli human rights organisation, Palestinians have access to 40%. Palestinians don't have freedom of movement. There is a wall, checkpoints, sector-only roads, sector-only buses, and land appropriation for the use of one particular group. There is a different law operating for Palestinians. Palestinians are tried by military courts. Water rights and building permits are denied to Palestinians, but are given freely to Israeli settlers who have no right to be there in the first place. In Israel itself, in the state of Israel itself, over 95% of the land is reserved for one particular ethnic group. And as I said, the right to marriage for Palestinian Israelis is limited. And if they marry a person of their choice who happens to be from the West Bank, then they have to leave Israel. Now, the Palestinian civil society have asked us to put pressure on the Israeli state. They've called for a boycott, a sporting, cultural, economic boycott of Israel. And we as a civil society group have responded to that call. And I would ask people to respond the voices of Palestinians. In 1984, when apartheid South Africa was at its height, and townships were being demolished and people were being moved into Bantustans, South Africa had the support of the great powers in the West, had the support of Margaret Thatcher in the UK and Ronald Reagan in America. And today, the apartheid Israeli state is supported by the European Union, by trading links, by direct grants and research funds to Israeli military organisations, to research funds to legal settlements in the West Bank, and the US, its biggest arms supplier and its protector in the Security Council of the United Nations. The lesson of the Do It Store strike is that apartheid can be finished. Apartheid can be ended. We can make apartheid history if we join together and oppose this injustice, not with hate of any people or any country or state, but with love for justice and love for freedom. We can defeat apartheid. We can defeat apartheid Israel, and we'll ask you to take a stand. Take a stand for freedom and justice. Make Israeli apartheid history. That's what I ask you. Make Israeli apartheid history. Thank you.